I dropped my purse on the floor the moment I stepped into the house. My knees almost gave out under me, and my feet were throbbing so hard I could barely walk another step. The smell of bleach and sweat clung to my clothes, my blonde hair was matted to my forehead, and my hands were cracked from scrubbing floors all day at the diner. I had worked a double shift again just to pay off their bills, electricity, water, rent, all of it. I thought maybe when I came home, there would be a little warmth, maybe even a thank you from my daughter Melissa. Instead, I was greeted with her voice echoing from the living room, sharp and annoyed. "Mom, you're late. Did you at least get the groceries? You know we're out of milk." Froze. Not even a hello. Not even a glance to see how I was holding up. My swollen feet felt like they were on fire, my left arm sore from carrying trays, and my back ached from bending over for hours. I wanted to cry, but I bit it back. "Melissa," I said softly, my voice trembling. "Could you at least ask me how I'm doing? I've been working all day for you." She rolled her eyes, finally turning to look at me. "You're being dramatic, Mom. Everyone works. Stop acting like you're the only one who's tired." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own daughter, the one I sacrificed everything for, looked at me like I was a burden. She didn't notice the bruises on my arms, the way I was struggling to breathe, the fact that I hadn't eaten since yesterday. All she cared about was herself. As I stood there, holding onto the wall for balance, her boyfriend, Jason, came in from the kitchen holding a beer. "Babe, just ignore her. She's old. They complain." He smirked at me like I was nothing. Something inside me snapped. I stared at both of them, my heart pounding in my chest. I had been working myself to the bone, scrubbing other people's messes just to make sure they had a roof over their heads. And this was how they repaid me. By mocking me. That night as I lay in bed, my body sore and my mind spinning, a thought crept in, one I had pushed away for years. What if I stopped? What if I stopped helping them altogether? But no, that wasn't enough. They needed to learn what it felt like to lose everything they took for granted. They needed a shock so big it would make them remember who I was and what I had done for them. The next morning I woke up with a plan. I didn't tell them. I didn't say a word. I simply smiled, packed a small bag, and left the house before sunrise. By the time they woke up, I was gone. And so was something else. Something they never expected I'd touch. When they realized what I had done, their screams shook the walls. When I left that house at dawn, the cool morning air brushed against my face, and for the first time in years I felt free. My swollen feet ached with every step, but my heart was racing with something new. Determination. I had been living like a servant in my own life, working endless hours at the diner, taking on cleaning jobs just to pay their bills, while they sat around complaining about Wi-Fi speed and ordering takeout with my money. I didn't go to work that morning. Instead, I headed straight to the bank. My name was still on every account. For years, I'd been the one depositing my checks, managing the bills, and keeping the lights on. They never bothered to look at the balances or even ask how much I was putting in. They assumed I would always provide. That was their mistake. With trembling hands, I withdrew every last cent from the joint account. Over $24,000 I had saved from years of scrubbing, sweating, and sacrificing. The cashier gave me a strange look, but I smiled politely. "Just closing a chapter," I said. After that, I went to the landlord's office. I had been the one signing the lease, not Melissa. She thought she owned the place just because she lived there. I told the landlord I was giving my 30-day notice, paid off the last month's rent, and requested to terminate the lease under my name. He nodded, knowing I had every legal right. By the time Melissa and Jason crawled out of bed around 10 a.m., they were already standing on borrowed time. I checked into a modest motel on the other side of town, far away from them. My body was sore, but my mind felt strangely alive. I treated myself to a warm shower, something I rarely took the time to enjoy at home because there was always someone pounding on the door, rushing me. As I wrapped myself in the motel's rough towel, I thought back to all the years I had spent raising Melissa. Her father left when she was just a baby, and I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs to make sure she never felt the absence. I gave her everything. Birthdays with cakes even when I couldn't afford dinner, college tuition I paid by cleaning office buildings at night, and endless support even when she made mistakes. And now she treated me like dirt. I sat on the motel bed and dialed my old friend Kathy. We hadn't spoken much because I was always working, but she picked up on the second ring. Sarah. Oh my God, it's been forever. Hearing her voice cracked something in me, and I told her everything. The exhaustion, the disrespect, the way my own daughter looked at me like I was useless. Kathy was silent for a moment and then said something that lit a fire in me. Honey, you've spent your whole life giving. It's time to take something back. That night I turned off my phone. I didn't want to hear Melissa's whining or Jason's insults. I wanted them to sweat, to panic, to realize that the woman they took for granted was the only reason they had a roof over their heads. The next day, I imagined the scene back at the house. Melissa storming into my room, finding my clothes gone, my purse missing. Jason probably tearing through the kitchen, yelling about food. Then the real shocker. The landlord's call telling them they had 30 days to leave. But that wasn't all. I still had one more card to play. Something they would never see coming. On the third day, I returned to the house not to move back in, but to collect something very important. Something they didn't even know existed. I slipped in while they were out, my hands shaking as I retrieved the envelope hidden under the loose floorboard in my bedroom. Inside was the deed to a small cabin my late uncle left me years ago, along with some bonds worth thousands. I never told Melissa about it because I wanted it to be my escape someday. As I locked the door behind me, I felt like I was closing a coffin. That house, that life was dead to me. Later that night, Kathy and I sat on the porch of the cabin. The stars above were so clear, and the air smelled of pine instead of bleach. I felt peace for the first time in years. They'll come looking for you, you know, Kathy said. Smiled. Let them. By the time they find me, they'll understand what they lost. Meanwhile, back in town, Melissa was losing her mind. I knew because she left me dozens of voicemails, her voice screeching through the phone. Mom, where are you? The landlord says we're being kicked out. Jason's furious. How could you do this to us? How could I do this to them? The audacity made me laugh. But I didn't call her back. Not yet. I wanted her to feel every ounce of fear and desperation I had felt for years. The real shocker was still coming. Because I wasn't just disappearing. I was about to make a move that would flip their world upside down. And when I did, they would never look at me the same way again. The night sky above the cabin was quiet. So quiet that I could hear my own heartbeat. I sat by the window, sipping tea, thinking about what had just begun. My body was finally resting, but my mind was still restless. I knew Melissa and Jason were tearing their hair out back in town, trying to figure out what had happened. And I wanted them to. They needed to taste the bitter medicine they had fed me for years. The next morning I decided to turn my phone back on, just to see what chaos had unfolded. As soon as the screen lit up, it was flooded with messages. Voicemails, texts, even emails. Melissa had gone from angry to desperate in less than 48 hours. Mom, where are you? We're sorry. Please call me. You can't just leave like this. The landlord said we have 30 days. Jason's saying we should sue you. Mom, please don't do this. I need you. For a moment, I felt a pang in my chest. She was still my daughter. But then I remembered her cold eyes, the way she dismissed my pain, the way Jason laughed at me. Well, this was their lesson, and I had to let it burn. Kathy stopped by the cabin later that day with groceries. How does it feel? She asked with a smirk. Strange, I admitted. Like I've taken my first breath in years. She nodded. Good. Now let them figure life out on their own for once. While I was rebuilding my peace, Melissa and Jason were spiraling. A mutual friend from town called me secretly and told me they had been kicked out of the house even sooner than expected because Jason got into a shouting match with the landlord. They packed their things and were now staying in Jason's friend's dirty basement. I should have felt sorry for them, but I didn't. Not yet. Days turned into a week. I spent my mornings walking through the forest near the cabin, feeling the sun on my skin, listening to the birds sing. My hands no longer ached from scrubbing, my feet weren't swollen anymore. I was finally living. But there was something else I needed to do. Melissa still thought I was just hiding. She still didn't understand the full extent of what I had taken. She didn't know that the cabin wasn't the only thing my uncle left me. Along with the bonds I had retrieved, there was also a large sum of money sitting quietly in an account under my name only. It was more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my days. I had kept it secret for years because I wanted Melissa to learn independence. Instead, she learned entitlement. I drove into town with my sunglasses on, avoiding places where I might run into her. I met with a lawyer, a kind older man who had known my uncle. We sat in his office, surrounded by stacks of papers and the smell of old leather. "Sarah, are you sure you want to do this?" he asked after I explained my plan. "I've never been more sure," I said firmly. We drew up documents that would transfer my money, my bonds, and the cabin into a trust that only I could access. If anything happened to me, the funds would go to a charity I had chosen long ago, not to Melissa. She had made her choices, and now I was making mine. When I left that office, I felt lighter, like I had dropped a 100-pound bag I'd been carrying for years. That evening, as I watched the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, my phone rang again. It was Melissa. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to hear her voice. "Mom," she said, her tone shaky. "I'm here," I replied calmly. "Where are you?" "Please, we're sorry. Jason's been yelling, and we don't have anywhere to go. Please come back. We need you." I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in. "You need me," I said slowly. "But when I needed you, you laughed. You turned your back on me." She sniffled on the other end. "I didn't mean it. I was stressed. Please, Mom. I'll do better." I almost softened, but then Jason's voice in the background shouted, "Tell her to give us the money, or we're screwed." And just like that, the softness vanished. "I'm not coming back, Melissa," I said firmly. "You're on your own now." Before she could respond, I hung up. That night, I locked the door of my cabin, sat by the fire, and let the warmth wrap around me. I had never felt stronger. But I knew Jason wouldn't take this quietly. He was greedy, and greed makes people dangerous. 2 nights later, just as I was dozing off, I heard a noise outside. Footsteps crunching on the gravel. My heart raced as I peeked through the window. A shadow moved near the porch. I grabbed the phone with trembling hands, ready to call for help. Whoever it was, they were getting closer. And when I opened the door, what I saw made my blood run cold. The wooden floor creaked under my bare feet as I approached the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. The porch light flickered slightly, casting long, eerie shadows on the cabin walls. I took a deep breath, my fingers trembling as I wrapped them around the doorknob. Slowly I pulled it open, and the cold night air rushed in. There, standing in the glow of the porch light, was Melissa. Her hair was a tangled mess, her eyes swollen from crying, and she clutched her jacket tightly around her. She looked nothing like the proud, defiant daughter who used to mock my exhaustion. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please don't shut the door." For a moment I just stood there, staring at her. My emotions swirled, anger, sadness, and an ache so deep it almost took my breath away. "Melissa, what are you doing here?" I asked coldly. She took a shaky step forward. "Jason, he kicked me out. We got into a fight after he found out you took the money. He blamed me for everything and left me at the side of the road. I walked for hours to find this place. Please, Mom, I have nowhere else to go." Part of me wanted to pull her into my arms, to tell her everything would be okay. But another part remembered the countless nights I came home broken and exhausted, only to be met with her cold words. I stepped aside slowly and let her in. She stumbled inside, looking around the small cabin with wide eyes. "This is yours. All this time." I nodded, shutting the door behind us. "Yes. And I kept it a secret for a reason." Melissa sat on the edge of the couch, her hands shaking. "I'm sorry, Mom. I was terrible to you. Jason made me say things. but I went along with it. I thought you'd always be there, no matter how I treated you. Her voice cracked and tears slid down her cheeks. For the first time in years, I saw the scared little girl she used to be. I worked myself to the bone for you, I said quietly. I gave you everything I had. And you couldn't even give me respect. I know, she whispered, burying her face in her hands. I was wrong. Please, give me another chance. I sat down across from her, staring at the flames dancing in the fireplace. My heart hurt, but I couldn't let her back into my life so easily. You can stay here for the night, I said finally. But this doesn't erase what you did. Trust has to be rebuilt. She nodded, sobbing softly. We sat in silence for a long time, the only sound the crackle of the fire. I thought maybe things could start to heal, maybe this was the beginning of something new. But then a sharp crash shattered the moment. The window near the kitchen burst inward, and a rock tumbled across the floor. Melissa screamed, and I jumped to my feet. Outside, a figure moved in the darkness. I didn't need to see his face to know who it was. Jason. Melissa gasped. Oh my God, he followed me. I rushed to the door, locking it, my heart pounding. Stay away from the windows, shouted. Jason's voice cut through the night, full of rage. Sarah, open this door right now. You think you can run off with what's mine? Melissa trembled in the corner, sobbing. Mom, he's drunk. He's dangerous. I grabbed the old shotgun my uncle had left in the cabin, my hands steady despite the fear boiling inside me. I'm done being scared, I muttered to myself. Jason pounded on the door, each hit making the wood groan. You open this, or I'll break it down. You can't hide from me. Melissa clung to me, crying. Please, Mom, don't let him in. The pounding grew louder, more violent. I raised the shotgun, pointing it at the door. My breath came in slow, controlled bursts. Jason, I yelled through the door. You take one step inside this house, and it will be the last step you ever take. There was silence. For a moment I thought he might back off. But then the sound of splintering would fill the cabin as he kicked harder. Melissa screamed. The door frame cracked. And just as the door gave way, I pulled the trigger. The deafening blast shook the walls. Smoke filled the room. When it cleared, Jason was lying on the porch, groaning, his leg bleeding from where the bullet grazed him. I stood there, my hands steady on the gun. You'll never hurt me or my daughter again, I said coldly. Melissa clutched my arm, sobbing. Jason groaned, cursing under his breath as he tried to crawl away. The sirens in the distance grew louder. Someone must have called the police. As the red and blue lights flashed against the trees, I knew this night would change everything. But what happened when the cops arrived would shock everyone, including me. The sirens drew closer, the flashing red and blue lights slicing through the trees, casting eerie shadows across the cabin walls. Melissa clung to me, trembling, as Jason writhed on the porch, clutching his leg and cursing between pained groans. The smell of gunpowder still hung heavy in the air, mixing with the crisp scent of pine. My hands were steady, the shotgun still firm in my grip, though inside my chest my heart pounded like a war drum. The police cars screeched to a halt, their tires crunching on gravel. 2 officers jumped out, guns drawn, shouting, "Drop the weapon! Step away from the door!" I slowly set the shotgun on the ground, raising my hands. "It's me," I called out, my voice strong but calm. "I'm the homeowner." He tried to break in. Melissa sobbed behind me, her voice cracking as she shouted, "Please!" He was trying to kill us. The officers rushed forward, one keeping his gun trained on Jason while the other approached me cautiously. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" he asked. I shook my head. "No." But he tried to force his way in. I warned him. I had no choice. Jason groaned louder, trying to twist the story. "She shot me. She's crazy. Arrest her." The officer glanced down at him with disgust. "Sir, your trespassing and armed home intrusion is a felony. Stay still." Melissa suddenly screamed, pointing to Jason's jacket. "He has a knife." The officer quickly kicked the blade away from Jason's reach, confirming Melissa's words. My stomach churned as I realized just how close we had been to real danger. They called an ambulance, and as paramedics lifted Jason onto the stretcher, he glared at me with venom. "You'll pay for this, old woman," he spat. I stared back, unflinching. "No, Jason. You already paid the moment you stepped onto my porch." The officers asked us questions inside the cabin. I explained everything. How Melissa came to me scared, how Jason followed her, how he tried to break in despite my warnings. The officer nodded, writing everything down. "Given the evidence and witnesses," he said firmly, "you were within your rights to defend yourself. He's going to jail tonight." When they left, the cabin fell silent again. Melissa sat on the couch, her face pale and her hands shaking. I sat beside her, my heart heavy. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't deserve you. I let him control me. I treated you horribly. And you still protected me." I looked at her, tears burning in my eyes. "You're my daughter. I'll always protect you. But this has to change, Melissa. You have to change." She nodded, crying into her hands. For the next few days, she stayed with me at the cabin, quiet and distant, as if she were battling her own demons. I watched her, hoping the lesson was sinking in. Every morning, I made coffee and sat on the porch, feeling the sun on my skin, savoring the peace I had fought so hard to reclaim. But peace, it seemed, was not ready to stay. On the third day after the shooting, while Melissa was inside folding blankets, I noticed a car slowly creeping down the dirt road toward the cabin. It wasn't a police car or an ambulance. It was a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. My gut tightened. The car stopped a few feet from the porch. Two men in suits stepped out, their expressions unreadable. One of them called out, "Mrs. Johnson?" I hesitated. "Who's asking?" He pulled out a badge. "We're with a private investigation firm. We've been hired to locate certain assets and property tied to your late uncle's estate. We need to speak with you." Melissa stepped out onto the porch, alarm flashing in her eyes. "Mom, who are they?" My heart sank. Nobody was supposed to know about the estate. Nobody except me, the lawyer, and Melissa now. The man stepped closer, his voice calm but cold. "We have reason to believe someone has been hiding significant financial assets. You need to come with us to answer a few questions." Melissa gripped my arm, trembling. "Mom, what's happening?" I stood my ground, my voice steady. "If you have questions, you can ask my lawyer. I'm not going anywhere with you." The second man smirked slightly. "Mrs. Johnson, this is not a request." Before I could react, the first man reached into his coat. My blood ran cold. Melissa screamed. I backed toward the cabin door, but they were already closing the distance. Suddenly, a deafening sound split the air, the roar of a shotgun blast. Not mine. Kathy stood at the edge of the trees, her old hunting rifle aimed at the men. "Back away from her," she shouted fiercely. The men froze, their hands raised. "We're not here to hurt anyone," the first man yelled. "Then you'd better turn around and leave." Kathy barked. They slowly backed away, got into their car, and drove off without another word. My knees almost gave out as Melissa pulled me back into the cabin. Kathy rushed up the porch, her face flushed with anger. "Sarah, those men weren't just investigators. I know their type. They're after something big." I sat down, my hands trembling. "They know about the money," I whispered. Melissa's eyes widened. "Mom, what's going on? What money?" I looked at her, my chest tight. "Melissa, there's more to this than you think. And if those men come back, we're all in danger." Kathy leaned close, her voice low. "You need to tell us everything, Sarah. Now." I took a shaky breath, ready to reveal the secret I had kept buried for years. But before I could speak, the sound of a car door slamming outside made us all jump. The black sedan had returned, this time with more cars behind it. And when the first man stepped out holding a piece of paper, I realized with horror what it was. The paper fluttered in the night breeze as the man in the suit approached. His face expressionless but his presence radiating authority. The headlights from the black sedan glared against the cabin, casting long shadows that made the moment feel unreal. Behind him, 2 other vehicles had pulled up, and more men stepped out, each one dressed sharply, their eyes scanning the surroundings like hawks. Melissa gripped my arm so tightly it hurt. "Mom, what is that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I forced myself to stand straight, though my heart felt like it would pound out of my chest. "Let's find out." The man stopped a few feet from the porch and raised the document. "Mrs. Johnson, this is a court order. You are required to relinquish certain financial documents and assets connected to the estate of William Brooks, your late uncle. Failure to comply will result in legal action." Kathy stepped forward, her hands clenched at her sides. "You can't just barge in here waving papers at her in the middle of the night. You have no right to harass her like this." The man's cold eyes flicked to Kathy. "We are acting under the authority of the court, ma'am. Mrs. Johnson has been avoiding disclosure of assets that belong to multiple interested parties. We're here to collect." Melissa looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Mom, what are they talking about?" My mouth went dry. For years, I had kept the full truth locked away. My uncle's estate wasn't just a small inheritance. It was massive. When he passed, he left me not only the cabin and the bonds, but also shares in a company that had exploded in value over the years. I had kept it secret because I wanted to live quietly, away from the greed and chaos that money brings. But somehow, someone had discovered it. I swallowed hard. "You're not getting anything without my lawyer present," I said firmly, forcing strength into my voice. The man stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low, threatening tone. "Mrs. Johnson, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. If you don't comply, this will get very ugly." Melissa clung to me, shaking. Kathy, never one to back down, pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the sheriff right now. You people have no right to intimidate her." The man smirked. "By the time the sheriff gets here, this will already be over." Suddenly, he snapped his fingers, and 2 of his men began moving toward the porch. Melissa screamed, pulling me back. Kathy raised her rifle again, her hands steady as a rock. "One more step and I'll put you in the dirt," she growled. The men froze. Tension thickened the air like smoke. My knees felt weak, but I forced myself to stand firm. "You think you can scare me?" I said, my voice trembling but loud enough for them to hear. "I've survived worse than you. I've been broken, humiliated, and left with nothing, but I rebuilt myself. You want my uncle's money. You'll have to kill me to get it." The leader stared at me for a long, tense moment. Then, with a sharp gesture, he signaled his men to back off. "This isn't over, Mrs. Johnson," he said coldly. "We'll be back, with proper enforcement." They retreated to their cars, the engines growling as they drove off into the night. Melissa collapsed onto the couch, sobbing in relief. Kathy lowered her rifle, her face pale but determined. I sat down slowly, my hands shaking uncontrollably. "They're not going to stop," I whispered. "They know too much." Melissa wiped her tears. "Mom, why didn't you tell me about this? About the money, the company shares, everything." I looked at her, my voice breaking. "Because I didn't want you to turn into them. I didn't want greed to poison you like it did everyone else." She grabbed my hand. "I don't care about the money. I care about you." Kathy put a hand on my shoulder. "Sarah, you need to disappear. At least for a while. These people won't wait for courts or lawyers. They'll come at you from every angle." My mind spun. Running again. I had just reclaimed my life. But Kathy was right. These men weren't playing by the rules. "I'm not leaving this cabin," I said firmly, standing up. "This is my home. My uncle left it to me, and I'm not giving it up without a fight." Melissa's eyes glistened with fear. "Then we have to be ready." The next morning I called my lawyer and told him everything. He promised to take immediate legal action to block any false claims. But even as he spoke, I knew paperwork wouldn't stop the kind of men who had come to my door last night. That evening, while Melissa was in the kitchen making tea, I went outside to check the locks on the cabin. The air was still, almost unnaturally quiet. I scanned the tree line, my nerves on edge. That's when I saw it. Hidden in the branches of a pine tree. A small, blinking red light. Camera. My stomach dropped. They were watching us. I yanked it down, my hands shaking, and stormed back inside. "They've been spying on us," I said, throwing the device onto the table. Melissa gasped. "Oh my God, Mom, what do we do?" Kathy picked up the camera, her face grim. "This isn't just about money anymore. They're tracking your every move." My chest tightened, fear clawing at my throat. But beneath the fear, something else rose. A burning determination. "They want to scare me," I said, my voice hard. "But they just made the biggest mistake of their lives." Melissa looked at me with wide eyes. "What are you going to do?" I took a deep breath, my mind already racing with a plan. "I'm going to turn the tables on them. They think I'm an old, weak woman they can intimidate. They're about to find out how wrong they are." That night, as darkness settled over the cabin, I packed a small bag, loading it with the documents, the bonds, and something else my uncle had left me, something no one knew I had. When I zipped the bag shut, Melissa asked nervously, "Mom, where are you going?" I turned to her with a calm but fierce look. "To end this. Once and for all." I stepped out into the cold night, my breath clouding in the air. The forest loomed ahead, the silence thick and heavy. And then, from the shadows, a voice whispered, "Going somewhere, Mrs. Johnson?" Froze. The voice was low and chilling, sliding through the darkness like a knife through silk. My heart jumped into my throat as I slowly turned toward the sound. From behind a tree, a man stepped out. Not one of the suited men from before. This one was different. He wore a dark hoodie, and his face was partly hidden, but his eyes gleamed with menace. Melissa rushed to the door, her voice trembling. "Mom, get back inside." The man smirked, stepping closer. "Oh, don't mind me. I'm just here to deliver a message." I stood my ground, my fingers tightening around the strap of my bag. "Who sent you?" He chuckled darkly. "The same people you refused to hand over what's theirs. You've caused them a lot of trouble, old lady. They're getting impatient." From inside the cabin, Kathy shouted, "Sarah, get down!" Before I could react, she fired a warning shot into the air. The loud crack split the silence, sending birds scattering into the night sky. The man froze, his smirk vanishing. "You tell your bosses," Kathy growled from the porch, her rifle aimed steadily at his chest. "If they want a war, they're gonna get one." The man raised his hands slightly, backing away. "You think you can hide forever? They'll get what they want. And when they do, no one will be left to protect you." With that, he melted back into the darkness, his footsteps fading until there was only silence again. I exhaled slowly, my hands trembling. Melissa ran to me, grabbing my arm. "Mom, this is getting too dangerous. You have to call the police again. You can't do this alone." But my mind was already spinning, not with fear, but with fury. "No, Melissa," I said, my voice cold. "The police can't stop men like this. They'll just keep coming back. If I don't end this now, we'll never be safe." Kathy lowered her rifle, her eyes sharp. "Then we need a plan. A good one." We went back inside and locked every window and door. I sat at the table, staring at the blinking light of the dismantled camera on the counter. They had been watching us, waiting for me to slip up. Well, if they wanted to play games, I'd give them a game they'd never forget. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the cabin made my heart race. But by morning I had a plan. I called my lawyer first thing. "I need all the records of my uncle's estate, everything," I demanded. "Sarah, what are you planning?" he asked. "I'm going to make sure they can't touch a dime," I said. With his help, I set up a new trust, transferring everything into a secure account under layers of legal protection. Not even the most determined investigator could untangle it. And just to twist the knife, I arranged for a large portion of it to be donated to a veterans charity, publicly. That way, if they came after me, they'd also be going against an organization that the public respected. Meanwhile, Kathy helped me reinforce the cabin. She set up tripwires, alarms, and even some old bear traps her late husband had stored in the shed. Melissa, despite her fear, stayed close, watching every move, as if finally realizing just how strong I really was. By the third day, the men returned. Not in the middle of the night this time, but broad daylight, bold as ever. The same leader from before stepped out of the sedan, holding another document. "This is your final warning, Mrs. Johnson," he said with a cold smile. "Sign over the assets, or you won't like what happens next." I stood on the porch, my arms crossed, staring him down. "You want the assets? You'll have to explain to the media why you're stealing from a charity now." His smug expression faltered for the first time. "That's right," I said. "Every cent is gone. Untouchable. The charity holds it now, and they have lawyers 100 times meaner than yours. You've lost." His face darkened. "You think this protects you? You've just made yourself a bigger target." From behind me, Kathy stepped out, her rifle casually resting on her shoulder. "Try it," she said with a deadly calm. Melissa appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, recording everything. "Smile for the camera," she said. "The police will love this." The man's jaw tightened. He took a step closer but stopped when he heard the click of Kathy's rifle. After a tense silence, he turned to his men. "Let's go." As they got back into their cars, he leaned out the window one last time. "This isn't over, Sarah. You've made powerful enemies." They drove off, their tires spitting gravel. My hands were shaking, but I stood tall. "Let them come," I muttered. For the next week, things were quiet. Too quiet. I thought maybe they had given up, but deep down I knew better. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, Melissa came running inside, her face pale. "Mom, there's smoke." I ran to the window, my heart sinking. In the distance, thick black smoke curled into the sky. It was coming from the edge of the forest, close to the cabin. Kathy rushed in, eyes wide. "They've set a fire." Melissa clutched my arm, her voice shaking. "Mom, we have to leave. We'll be trapped." But I wasn't moving. Not yet. My mind was racing, calculating as the smoke drew nearer. The flames were creeping toward us, devouring everything in their path. "They think they can scare me into running," I said, my voice steady. "But they're the ones who should be scared." Melissa's eyes widened. "Mom, what are you going to do?" I grabbed the small black case my uncle had left me, the one even Kathy didn't know about. Inside was something that could change everything. I looked at both of them, my grip tight on the case. "I'm going to end this, once and for all." And as the flames crackled in the distance, licking closer to the cabin, I stepped out into the smoky night, ready to face whatever came next. But when I opened the case and saw what was inside, I realized this fight was about to take a turn none of us expected. The case clicked open with a sharp snap, and inside lay something I hadn't seen in decades. A small metal box with my uncle's initials engraved on it, a USB drive taped to the inside, and a folded envelope that felt thick with documents. My breath caught as I lifted the items out. This wasn't just some stash. This was something my uncle had hidden for a reason. Melissa covered her mouth. "Mom, what is that?" Kathy's eyes narrowed as she leaned closer. "Sarah, whatever's in there might be what they're after." I unfolded the envelope first. Inside were several old deeds, stock certificates, and, most shocking, a list of names with dates and bank account numbers scribbled in my uncle's handwriting. At the bottom, a note read, "If anyone comes for this, they're not after your money. They're after what I knew. Trust no one but the sheriff." My hands trembled as I held the USB drive. My uncle had been a quiet man, but he was also a whistleblower years ago. He had evidence against corrupt businessmen, people who would have done anything to bury the truth. Maybe they thought that evidence died with him. They were wrong. Before I could say a word, a loud crack outside made us all jump. It wasn't the fire this time, it was a gunshot. The glass of the kitchen window shattered, spraying shards across the floor. Melissa screamed, diving to the ground. "They're here!" Kathy yelled, grabbing her rifle and taking position near the door. The flames from the spreading forest fire cast an eerie orange glow outside, making the figures moving through the trees appear like demons in the smoke. At least 3 of them, armed, advancing slowly toward the cabin. My heart pounded as I clutched the USB drive. This was it. This was why they wanted me silenced. "We have to leave, Mom," Melissa cried, pulling at my arm. "No," I said firmly, my voice stronger than I felt. "If we run now, they'll hunt us down like animals. We stand our ground." Kathy fired a warning shot out the door, and one of the men ducked behind a tree. Another fired back, the bullet splintering the porch railing. The air filled with the acrid smell of smoke and gunpowder. I crouched behind the table, gripping the USB like my life depended on it, because it did. My uncle's note echoed in my head. "Trust no one but the sheriff." Melissa's voice trembled. "Mom, we're going to die here." "No, we're not," I said, pulling out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I managed to dial the sheriff's number directly. "Sarah." His voice came through, steady but urgent. "They're here," I gasped. "The men after my uncle's files. I have proof of everything. They're trying to burn us out." "I'm on my way," the sheriff said firmly. "Stay low. Keep the doors locked. Hold out until we get there." The call ended, and I stuffed the USB into my pocket, my fingers gripping it tightly. Kathy reloaded, her face grim. "They're not stopping, Sarah. They're pushing forward." The fire was spreading fast, the heat pressing against the walls, smoke seeping through the cracks. The men outside were closing in, using the fire as cover. I could hear them shouting to each other, their voices muffled by the roar of the flames. Melissa clutched my hand, her nails digging into my skin. "Mom, I'm scared." I looked into her tear-streaked face, and for a brief second, the years of pain between us faded. "Stay with me, baby. We're going to make it through this." Suddenly, the door burst open. One of the men had kicked it in, his gun raised. Everything happened in slow motion. Melissa screamed, Kathy swung her rifle, and I grabbed the shotgun from under the table. The man stepped forward, sneering. "Give me the drive, old woman." I raised the shotgun, my hand steady. "You'll have to kill me first." He aimed at me, his finger tightening on the trigger. Then bang. Kathy's rifle went off, the man collapsed, screaming as the bullet tore through his shoulder. Chaos erupted. Another man stormed in, and Melissa threw a burning log from the fireplace at him, the flames catching his jacket. He screamed, flailing as he ran back outside. The third man hesitated at the doorway, the fire behind him casting his shadow huge and monstrous. He growled, "This isn't over. You'll regret this." But before he could move, the sound of sirens cut through the chaos. Police cruisers burst through the trees, their lights flashing like salvation. The men scattered into the smoke, disappearing into the burning forest. Officers stormed the cabin, dragging the wounded man outside and extinguishing the flames on the second. The sheriff himself came in, his eyes narrowing as he saw the shattered glass and scorched walls. "You're lucky you called when you did," he said, his voice grim. "But this isn't just a simple break-in. These men are connected to something bigger, something your uncle tried to expose." I pulled the USB from my pocket and handed it to him. "This is what they're after. It has everything." The sheriff took it carefully. "Then this changes everything." Outside, the fire crews fought to contain the flames while the suspects were loaded into police cars. Melissa clung to me, sobbing in relief. Kathy put her hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Sarah," she said softly. "You held your ground." But I knew this wasn't the end. The sheriff had the evidence, but the people behind this weren't going to vanish quietly. They would come back, maybe harder than before. As the officers prepared to escort us to safety, The sheriff leaned close and whispered, "Sarah, once this evidence goes public, you'll have more enemies than you can count. Be ready." I nodded, my jaw tight. Let them come. I'm not afraid anymore. That night, we were taken to a secure location while the USB was analyzed. I thought maybe, just maybe, we could finally rest. But at dawn, as the first rays of sunlight broke through the smoke-filled sky, a phone rang in the sheriff's hand. His expression darkened as he answered. When he hung up, his face was pale. "They've put a bounty on you, Sarah," he said quietly. "And it's higher than anything I've ever seen." Melissa gasped. Kathy stiffened. I stood there, my heart pounding, as the weight of his words sank in. This fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The room fell silent after the sheriff's words. Melissa clung to my arm, trembling. Kathy's jaw tightened as she set her rifle against the wall, her expression dark. I felt the weight of what he had said settling into my bones. "Bounty? Me? How high?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. The sheriff hesitated. "Enough to make even good men turn bad. Enough to send professionals after you." Melissa gasped. "Mom, we can't stay here. They'll find us no matter where we go." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the fear wash over me, but then I pushed it down. I had spent my life letting people use me, walk over me, and now even threaten my life. Not anymore. I opened my eyes and met the sheriff's gaze. "Then we stop running. We end this once and for all." He frowned. "Sarah, these people have money, resources, and connections in places you can't imagine. Taking them on isn't easy." "I don't need easy," I said. "I need final." Kathy crossed her arms. "Whatever you're planning, I'm in." Melissa wiped her tears, her voice trembling but firm. "Me too. I'm not letting them hurt you again." The sheriff leaned forward. "There's only one way to end this. You take the evidence straight to the federal agents. Publicly. Once it's out, they can't kill the story or silence you without bringing more heat on themselves." I nodded slowly. "Then that's what we'll do." But as we prepared to move, the secure safe house suddenly went dark. The lights flickered, then cut off completely, plunging the room into darkness. Melissa screamed. "What's happening?" The sheriff pulled his gun. Backup generators should have kicked in. Unless someone cut the power. Through the darkness I heard it. A faint, almost mechanical whirring outside, followed by the crunch of tires on gravel. My heart stopped. "They're here," Kathy whispered. A single beam of light cut through the window, sweeping across the room like a hunting spotlight. Then a voice boomed through a speaker outside. "Sarah Johnson. Hand over the drive, and no one gets hurt." Melissa grabbed my hand, shaking. "Mom, they found us." The sheriff barked orders into his radio, but there was only static. Our communications were jammed. Whoever these men were, they were professionals. The front door shook violently as someone tried to break it down. The sheriff pointed his gun at the entrance, his jaw tight. "Get behind me." But I didn't move. Something inside me, something stronger than fear, told me this was my moment to act. I reached into my bag and pulled out a second USB my uncle had hidden, one I hadn't shown anyone yet. This one was labeled in his handwriting. "Emergency only." The whirring outside grew louder. A drone flew up to the window, its red light blinking like an eye staring straight at me. The voice outside repeated, "Last chance, Sarah. Hand it over." Melissa cried out, "Mom, they'll kill us." I stepped forward, holding the USB high. "You want it," I shouted through the window. "Come and get it." Before anyone could stop me, I yanked the curtains closed, ran to the back door, and slipped out into the darkness. I heard Kathy scream my name, but I didn't stop. The cold night air burned my lungs as I ran toward the tree line, clutching the USB. The drone followed me, its mechanical hum growing louder, and behind me I heard footsteps, men chasing me. Branches tore at my skin as I pushed deeper into the forest, my heart pounding, the sound of my own breath deafening. I knew if they caught me it was over. Then I reached the cliff edge, the ground falling away into a roaring river below. The men's voices grew closer, their flashlights cutting through the trees. I had nowhere left to run. I looked at the USB in my hand, then at the raging water. My uncle's voice echoed in my memory. Trust no one but yourself. As the men burst through the trees, aiming their guns, I made my choice. Jump. The icy water slammed into me like a wall, stealing my breath and spinning me into darkness. I clutched the USB tightly as the current dragged me away. Behind me, I heard the furious shouts of the men, but they couldn't follow. The river carried me far, spitting me out onto a rocky bank miles away. Gasping, shivering, I crawled onto the shore, clutching the USB to my chest. I was alive. When I finally opened my eyes, I saw headlights approaching. A vehicle stopped and a figure stepped out. "Sarah," the voice said softly. I blinked, barely able to focus. It wasn't the sheriff. It wasn't Kathy. It was someone I hadn't seen in 40 years. Someone I thought was dead. "Uncle William," I whispered. The figure stepped closer. His face lined with age but unmistakable. "It's me. I never died, Sarah. I've been hiding." My head spun. "But how?" He held out his hand. "We don't have time for that now. They'll be back. Come with me. We finish this together." With trembling hands, I gave him the USB. He nodded. "You've done well, Sarah. But the real battle is only beginning." He helped me into the truck, and we sped off into the night as the forest burned behind us. But what my uncle revealed next about the people hunting us would shake me to my core, and change everything I thought I knew. The truck rattled down the dirt road, its headlights cutting through the smoky darkness. My clothes clung to my skin, soaked and cold, and my hands trembled as I held onto the door handle. Beside me, Uncle William drove with the calmness of someone who had been running from danger for years. My voice cracked as I whispered, "I buried you. I went to your funeral. How is this possible?" He gave a faint, bitter smile. "The man they buried wasn't me. I staged it. I had to disappear. I had evidence that could take down some of the most powerful and dangerous men in the country. I knew if I stayed, they'd kill me, and anyone close to me." I stared at him, my chest tightening. "You let me believe you were dead all this time. It was the only way to protect you," he said softly. "But they found you anyway. They must have tracked the inheritance. The bonds, the cabin, everything I left behind became a beacon." I pulled the USB from my pocket, handing it to him. "They'll do anything to get this. They've tried to kill me. They put a bounty on my head." William's eyes hardened. "That's because this drive doesn't just have financial records. It has names, dates, proof of crimes that would put them all behind bars. It's not just money they're after, Sarah. It's survival." My hands clenched into fists. "Then let's end this. No more running." He nodded. "That's exactly what we're going to do." Hours later, we reached an abandoned airstrip hidden deep in the mountains. Inside an old hangar, a small team of federal agents waited, their faces tense. They had been working with my uncle in secret, gathering evidence for years. One agent stepped forward. "Mrs. Johnson, you've done something extraordinary. With this drive, we can dismantle the entire network." As they began downloading the files, William turned to me. "You've been braver than I ever expected. You stood up when most people would have broken." Tears welled in my eyes. "I was so scared, Uncle. But I wasn't going to let them win." Before he could answer, an agent shouted, "They're here. They found us." Through the hangar windows, black SUVs sped toward us, headlights glaring like predator eyes. Men in tactical gear jumped out, armed to the teeth. Gunfire erupted, bullets tearing into the walls. "Get down!" William shouted, pulling me behind a stack of crates. The agents returned fire, the hangar filling with smoke, shouts, and the deafening roar of gunfire. I crawled toward the server where the USB was still uploading. The progress bar crawled, 60%, 70%, 80%. Every second felt like an eternity. Bullets ricocheted around me, and one struck the crate inches from my head. Melissa's face flashed in my mind. Kathy's voice echoed in my ears. Stay strong, Sarah. When the bar hit 100%, the server beeped. The data had been successfully transmitted to secure federal servers. It was done. Suddenly, one of the attackers stormed in, grabbing me by the arm. His gun pressed against my ribs as he hissed, "Give me the drive." I stared into his cold eyes, and something inside me snapped. I slammed my elbow into his face, grabbed the gun from his grip, and fired. He collapsed, and I stood there, shaking but alive. The agents overwhelmed the rest of the attackers, and sirens wailed in the distance. Reinforcements. The surviving men fled, disappearing into the night like shadows. When the smoke cleared, the lead agent approached me. His expression fierce but respectful. "Mrs. Johnson, because of you, this network is finished. They'll be running scared for years." Uncle William put a hand on my shoulder. "You've done what even I couldn't, Sarah. You're a hero." Tears streamed down my face, but they were tears of relief, of release. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. By morning, the attackers were arrested, their leaders exposed. The bounty on my head vanished as the men behind it were dragged into the light. Melissa and Kathy were reunited with me under the protection of federal agents. Melissa hugged me tightly, crying into my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'll never take you for granted again." I stroked her hair, my heart swelling. "It's okay, baby. We've both learned." Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to something resembling normal. I returned to my cabin, rebuilt and stronger than ever, no longer a prisoner of fear. Melissa stayed with me, helping me with everything, finally seeing me not as a burden, but as the mother who had given her everything. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Kathy, Melissa, and I sat on the porch sipping tea. Uncle William had disappeared again, this time by choice, continuing his work from the shadows. Melissa looked at me with admiration. "Mom, after everything you've been through, what now?" I smiled, feeling peace wash over me for the first time in years. Now I live. On my own terms. The wind carried the scent of pine, the sky painted with colors of freedom. I had faced death, betrayal, and greed, and I had won. And as I looked at the horizon, I knew one thing for certain. They thought they could break me, but they only made me stronger. Fire, if this story touched your heart, amazed you with its twists, and showed you that strength has no age limit, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps keep stories like this alive.